Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Onyx. The Onyx Hunt App is the premium mobile GPS app that turns your phone or any mobile device into a mobile GPS. And with the Onyx Hunt app, one thing that you can do using the web map, so when you're on your computer or tablet, you can go in and import and export waypoints and files. So meaning, say you had a GPS where you had all these waypoints before, you can take those waypoints and import them right into the Onyx Hunt app, or maybe you're using a different mapping service. In addition to that, you can also export. So say you went Colorado elk hunting, you had all these waypoints, but you didn't necessarily need them for the whitetail season and you don't want to bog down your phone with all this content. You can export those and save those somewhere to be able to import them for next elk season. Again, it just kind of speeds up the process, speeds up your phone a little bit instead of bogging it down. So that's a neat feature that you can use within the Hunt app. If you want to check that out, you head over to onyxmaps.com, and if you use the coupon code EMW, that'll save yourself 20% off of the Hunt app. The University of Elk Hunting online course, a membership to the UEH, provides you with immediate access to the most comprehensive and complete resource for increasing your elk hunting knowledge, confidence, and hopefully your success. So in addition to having full access to the entire course for 1 year, you also have access to the UEH mobile app, which puts all that content from the online course right into the palm of your hand, anytime, anywhere, with or without cellular connection. Plus, you can get a lot of discounts from the Elk 101 partners, including 15% off of elk hunting gear from elk101.com. So a bunch of things you can learn from this and really invest in yourself to be able to learn from one of the best within Corey Jacobson and help of others to be able to put together this course. If you head over to elk101.com and use the coupon code EastMeetsWest, that'll save yourself 20% off of the 1 year membership. Tethered. So Tethered really evolved from a desire to provide quality gear and resources to the saddle hunting community. Because the community was such a small niche component of the greater hunting industry, the availability of saddle-specific gear and innovation was lacking. And Tethered came through and solved this problem by designing, engineering, and producing the most mobile, stealthy, and safest elevated hunting gear on the planet. If you head over to tetherednation.com, you can learn all about saddle hunting and also check out all of their great lightweight products. So in addition to that, I did want to mention, I just released a YouTube video over on my YouTube page that goes through a sample saddle hunting setup in the mountains. So it's just a short 1 minute video that Justin Mueller put together from our scouting mission this spring. So check that out over on the YouTube channel, which is just Beau Martonik. And so in addition to that, I was on a podcast here recently, another podcast that it means a lot to me to be able to be on it, and I'll explain why. So when I started the East Meets West Hunt podcast, it didn't just all of a sudden start one day. I had the vision for it back in 2017 and just, I was kind of worried about it. Why would someone want to listen to someone that, when I say someone, why would they want to listen to me who is inexperienced, doesn't know a whole lot about Western hunting, adventure hunting? Why would someone want to listen to me? But my goal of the podcast wasn't to show that I am the best at this or I knew all this information, because I don't. My goal was to be able to interview others who can share information to help you, the listener, and myself from a selfish standpoint to be able to go on adventure style hunts, show that they're possible from places from east to west, from the Appalachians to the Rockies and everywhere in between. And Brian Call from the Gritty podcast helped me with that. So Brian was able to he helped me pick out the gear, helped me record the first podcast, all this stuff. I had Brian on here recently, but what he did, which was really cool to me, was be able to have me on his podcast to talk a little bit about it. And that is now live up on his YouTube channel, so you can see us video chatting, as well as also you can find the audio version anywhere you can find podcasts, wherever you found this one at. So his podcast is called The Gritty Podcast, and once again, I interviewed Brian a few episodes back, so check that out. For this week's Mountain Buck Monday, brought to you on Tuesday, I have a story from Anthony Immediate. And Anthony, I think I got your name right. You had to spell it out for me in the email, but it's a tough one to pronounce. But this story is really great. So back in November of 2018, Anthony said, I looked at a topo map on an area that interested me for a couple of years that looked really promising. The next day, I set up for an afternoon hang and hunt. Within the first hour of my hunt, I had a hot doe in heat being chased by 3 shooters, a big 8, a solid 10, a double drop tine, and a mainframe 8. I could have shot the big 8 and another solid 7 that came in towards last light, but I had my mind set on hunting that double drop tine buck. I had passed on multiple shooters between that November and 18 and January 10th of 2020. On January 10th, 2020, I went back to my topo map and tried to narrow in on his bedding area. On January 11th, I set up a hang and hunt for an afternoon set. And within the first hour, the double drop time buck, along with 3 other bucks, were chasing a doe, bringing back my memory of when I first laid eyes on this monarch. Almost exactly the same scenario as the first encounter, but there was one problem. After he came in with 50 yards, I noticed he had shed the right side. Never shot a shed buck, never thought I would, probably would have judged people that have done it in the past. I was sitting in the tree, filming him coming into shooting range, and couldn't resist. Put my phone down, grabbed my bow, and released on the half-rack double drop time. At dark, I backed out, called a dog tracker to help me in the morning, and had a sleepless night. After finding the buck the next morning, I knew the task that I had to endure next, the shed hunt of a lifetime. I asked for help on the New Jersey Woods and Water Forum, and someone had messaged me willing to help. I met up with Ronnie. We searched for a few hours, and Ronnie yelled, I got it. It was a great 2-year chase for this buck, but the help I got from strangers and the camaraderie of hunters helping one another was what made this buck even more special to me. That's probably one of the coolest stories that has been sent in. That's just awesome to see hunters helping hunters. The two never even met each other before, met on a forum, and Ronnie went to help Anthony here find a buck of a lifetime. And you can see the photos of this buck over on the East Meets West Hunt Instagram and East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook. It's a really awesome deer, and it's just such an incredible story, from Anthony here. So send in your Mountain Buck Monday stories to me via email, or you can send them through social media. I love sharing these things. They've been really popular with you guys listening and checking them out on social media. So thank you for that. On this episode of the podcast, I have a guy coming out of the hills of Kentucky, Josh Profitt. Josh is caught my attention for quite a while now on social media and has the respect of some really well-known public land whitetail hunters. He is just a big buck killer, and he is all about scouting. And if you've seen my stuff long enough, I love scouting. I'm a big proponent of scouting all year long, and Josh really breaks that down. He's super successful in scouting 365, using trail cameras, adapting the situations, and really how to find that right spot to hunt. So I think you'll really enjoy this episode. A lot of really good information here. So check it out, and then check out Josh's Instagram page, BG_bowhunter, to see some more of his stuff. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. And tonight I'm joined on the line by a friend of mine coming out of Kentucky, Josh Profitt. What's going on, buddy?
Oh man, nothing. Excited about doing this podcast. I'm been driving around trying to find service to do this thing.
Yeah, I know. It's been funny. It's kind of like one of those old commercials. Like, can you hear me now? Nope. And then you hear your truck going down the road.
Yeah, no, we got her lined up though.
Yeah. This will be good. I'm excited. You've been doing a little bit of turkey hunting here recently, being off work. So that's it's been exciting to kind of live through your text messages of photos that you've been sending me.
Man, it's I don't ever get time off work. Like you and I talked earlier, a lot of times between drive time, I'm working right around 70 hours a week. And I knew as soon as they told me that I was furloughed, like the critters were definitely in trouble.
Yeah.
If only it was November.
Yeah, I know, right? If that was the time they'd be laying you off, you'd be in your glory.
Oh yeah, I really would be.
The problem is you wouldn't really be off because you'd probably be working more hours in the deer woods than you would otherwise.
I always told everybody, I take a vacation to deer hunt every year, and I feel like I need 2 vacations after that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I use all my vacation to go hunting, which is definitely not a normal person's vacation, or it's a work trip, I guess. But I enjoy it, but it's definitely work.
Oh yeah.
And Josh, so you're a coal miner for your day job, correct?
Correct.
So you're working long hours, labor intensive. How the heck do you get or maybe this is I'm wording this question wrong, but how do you get the time to hunt?
I really don't, man. I've done several podcasts and none of them's changed. I have my kids every other weekend. So basically I'm looking at 4 days a month to hunt and scout. And, I don't know, God has just always been good to me, man. And I've been very blessed to somehow, pull it off and have fun.
Yeah. So do you, with that limited time, are you hunting mostly in your home state of Kentucky, or are you getting out and different places, or what's that look like?
No, it's mostly done here in the Bluegrass. Just because my time is so limited, if I was to go somewhere else, I wouldn't have time to hunt here at home. And the hunting here is great, and I enjoy it. And a lot of these, public properties I hunt, I just run them like I do like it's my own farm. So I do have 4 points for Iowa right now, and I do have 1 point for Kansas. So there are some out-of-state trips coming up. Going to do one with Nathan Gillen. Going to do Iowa with him, and then I'm going to do Kansas with Chad from Exodus.
Nice. That'll be that's all this year?
I think me and Chad's going to do Iowa, or me and Nathan going to do Iowa this year, hopefully, and then Chad and I are going to do Kansas next year.
Okay.
But that's pretty much it. I get to hop across the river into Indiana. So sometimes if I tag out early, I'm like 6 miles from state line, and the public that I do hunt in Indiana is closer to my house than the public I hunt in Kentucky.
That's funny. And so for anyone listening, if you heard some of the names you mentioned there, Nathan Killen was one I had on a few episodes back. I guess it's a couple months back now. Just absolute killer from Virginia. And he mentioned you, Josh, as far as hunting with you, and you guys were buddies. He's such a good dude. And then Chad Sylvester from Exodus as well. Both great guys.
Oh yeah, man, they really are. Nathan really is a stone cold killer, and Chad, he's just Chad. Him and I are real good friends, and it is what it is. We share a great relationship.
Yeah, that's cool. So within hunting, Kentucky, Indiana, what are you looking at? Like, what kind of terrain or habitat are you typically hunting there?
So I'm strictly public land when it comes to deer hunting. I think it's my 14th season. It's all starting to become just one big blur. I prefer hill country, man. The hill country deer, in my opinion, they're just so much easier to predict. Nothing is ever certain, but it's a lot easier to kill an animal when the animal uses the terrain to their advantage versus a piece of flat ground where they can walk anywhere. I know that they can still use drainages and tree lines, but for my 25 years of hunting, it's definitely easier to get on the bucks in the hill country.
Mm-hmm. And when you're describing hill country, you're talking about just some of the steeper, just big woods type terrain?
Yeah, probably nothing like, not mountain country, but just, good hills and with bottoms and with ag in the bottoms and on the top of the hills. Just depends on where they are. They're still ag, but it's hill country.
I gotcha. That and one thing you said there about like the difference with the hill country versus like flatter land. I know there's some places, actually one of the places that I hunt that's flatter but still just like a lot of timber. Well, it's all timber, but it is so much harder to figure out the movement of the deer in those areas because there's some of it's like literally there's not really any terrain, and there's some of the biggest deer I'm hunting are in these areas, and I struggle so much to do that, where if I'm hunting some of the really steep country, it can be some rugged places, but you can predict a little bit of their movement better than you can those other places. I agree with that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So when you're hunting some of these places, you said you've been doing that the last 14 years, and I haven't really known you very long. We've chatted back and forth on Instagram, but just seeing all your photos and talking to people that have known you, you've been really successful at hunting these properties and everything. I'm interested in kind of hearing how you kind of dive into these pieces from the beginning, like from a scouting to a hunting standpoint, and your strategy, which I know a little bit about just from listening to you before and reading some of your posts, but I want to hear about that.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it.
So whenever you're looking at a piece of, like, say you're looking at a piece of public land, what are some of the things that you're looking at for you personally that makes it worthwhile to even go in and check out with the limited time that you have?
So for me personally, I like a good mix of hills and agriculture. And I definitely like a piece of property that's bigger. Number one, if it's a bigger piece, it's going to hold more deer and more hunting pressure. And then the third piece would be access. The less access you got, the better the hunting will be. I found out a time ago that access plays a key into that, and into any kind of hunting. But that public land hunting, if you got access on northeast, south, and west, it makes it really hard to get away from people. A lot of people think they're going deep, and they're walking deep for no reason because somebody on the 2 miles on the other end is trying to walk a mile or a mile and a half in. And a lot of times a lot of the good hunting pressure or good hunting is right there around the parking lots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're going in and you're looking at these places with access, what are you looking online and say with Onyx and looking at areas that are listed for parking, or is this something that you're kind of driving around the area and figuring out? Like, when you're talking about access, are you talking more like parking lots, or are you just talking about in general places that people can go in?
General places and parking lots. Like here in Kentucky, you're not supposed, if it's not a designated parking area, you're not supposed to go in it. A lot of people do. They'll mix it up and they'll just park off the side of the road. But like a lot of times, if the property, let's just say it's a half a mile wide and it's 2 miles deep and it's landlocked by private property on 3 sides, like you truly do got a chance to go deep, which generally, if you can do that, it offers better hunting just because there's not, the people don't want to put in the work. That's more or less what I'm talking about. But I mean, you can't pass up the obvious, get on Onyx or hunt stand and, scout from home. And then if you have a chance, whether it's in state or out of state, like, drive there and physically check it out. There's no substitution for driving around, physically checking it and getting the boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. Like, I don't truly feel comfortable in there until I kind of get to drive around the perimeter or just through some of the areas and check them out, because there's so many spots that you don't know, or pull-offs or places that people can access from, or you can find some of your own. Like, because in Pennsylvania, I mean, we can pull off anywhere alongside a dirt road. It don't matter. There's not really any. I mean, some of the game lands have designated parking areas, but in a lot of the big state forests and national forests and stuff, it's just kind of a free for all where people are going to park. So that was kind of a, the way you're talking about is a little bit different than what I've experienced, I guess, in the past. But that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess the game changer was for me is, it's been years ago, but planned this big hunt out, walked a mile in, and I got back there and, there in plenty of time early, trying to do everything right on a hanging hunt. And I run into somebody and, him and I had both spent an hour walking in the dark, trying to go to where nobody else was. And all that happened was I come in from the top side trying to catch the deer coming, back from the food. And it didn't matter to him. He come right through the fields, down below me. And it just wasn't, it didn't matter to him. He didn't think about it. And we ran right into each other, literally a mile from any road in any direction. And so that just opened my eyes, just because you're going deep doesn't mean anything. Like you gotta be smart about it. Mm-hmm. So that the access is probably one of my key things when it comes to me hunting the public property.
Okay. That makes sense. And so when you find an area or a few areas that you're going to go in, what does your game plan look like? Are you trying to scout in the spring? Is this something that you do in season? What is that kind of looking like?
All year, man. A lot of people say it's 365 if you're a whitetail hunter, and it really is. Like, you just don't let your season end. My time is very limited. So when the whole time I'm shed hunting, I'm also scouting. And then when I'm turkey hunting, I'm scouting. And the good thing about it is, like, I love to run a bunch of cameras. Like, it's just part of who I am. And a lot of people, they don't understand it, or they look down on me. But like when you're running 50 or 70 cameras on this public land, like, you're not just checking cameras. Like, it's a constant scouting mission, and you find so much fresh sign. You find out so much more when you actually do get to walk around.
Yeah. So you're a person that likes to see it and then kind of hunt that fresh sign, if that's what you're saying here, and then let the cameras help you out a little bit with some of that scouting.
Yeah. I mean, I like to always work my way backwards. I like to start at all the food sources, as far as the agriculture, because those are easiest to find, from aerial or Onyx. And I just like to start there and check the deer sign and work my way back towards to where I would think that they would be bedding. And, over the last 5 or 6 years, it's worked out a lot better for me. Deer are slaves to their stomach. They really are. They got to eat. And a lot of times on this public property, they're mainly only using the fields at night, but they're laying down the sign. And if you can pick up that sign and cut it back through the woods and piece everything together, bed to feed or transition, like, it really starts to make sense on to where you need to be.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing that, and you're going in and scouting and running these cameras, are you running cameras near the food sources on public? Or what's your kind of camera strategy look like as you're going back in?
Let's just say the field was 15 acres. I'll at least have one camera on it. If it's a really hot field, I'll have a couple on it. And then I may have one or two off some, secondary trails that I think are leading back towards bedding. So I actually do, man, I will run them right on the fields, and then I'll run them 100 or 200 yards off of them. Depends on how far the deer are bedded. A lot of times if the hunting pressure's real low, the deer are bedded real close to the food. And then, if the hunting pressure's, substantial, it doesn't mean it's a bad food source. That just means the deer are typically a little further away from it.
Okay. And so, you're saying you're running, a ridiculous amount of cameras. When you're running those cameras, one, I guess let's start off with when you're running them on public, are you having any issues with them getting stolen?
On average, I lose maybe 2 a year. Between, if I run off my cameras, I have close to 70, and it's normally around 2 a year. Now, some years it's been higher. This year I didn't get, because of everything that went on with my season and my deer dying. I didn't run near as many. I didn't lose any. Mm-hmm. But there's been one year we lost 15 or 16. But for the most part, as a whole, it's been pretty good.
Yeah.
Not what you would think. There's an art to it, man. Like you got to learn how to hide these things. And then you got to learn the areas where they get stolen at and where they don't get stolen at.
Yep.
If you know a property, like I said, I hunt these farms like they're my own. And so like I really, really get to know them. And, a lot of these people that hunt these public properties, man, they're just like a whitetail. They're creatures of habit. They like to go to the same few hundred acres. And if you get into a rude guy's hot zone, I'm telling you right now, the camera may be gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, I rarely get them stolen myself, and I don't run as many cameras as you, but I'm running about 20 myself now, and I know my dad runs probably, I don't know, 35 to 40 of them, and we may get one stolen a year, if that. It's pretty rare, and like you said, I'm not like, if there's like on a oak ridge and there's this scrape in the wide open, I'm not setting my camera 3 feet off the ground on this scrape. I'll try to keep them out of sight if possible. If it's in an area where it's a little bit more open, I'll usually take my stick and set it up in the tree and angle it down, or kind of camouflage it with a stump, or put it even lower to the ground. Like I don't know, just try to be, thoughtful with it and keep it out of the average view, I guess. Yep.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. I've just heard it so many times that people say how bad it is when people get cameras stolen on public. And I just, at least in the areas I've hunted, I, haven't had that experience, that as far as that much of a negative experience.
No, it's not bad. I've had mainly, as a whole, good experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these pieces that you're hunting, speaking of people potentially stealing them, do they usually have a whole lot of hunting pressure, or are you kind of finding places that don't have a ton?
Man, the thing about everywhere I got to hunt is we got the velvet, we got our velvet hunting, which a lot of states don't offer it. We got over-the-counter tags that aren't ridiculous. We have a November rifle hunt that lasts 2 weeks. So we get a lot of hunting pressure. And even though that the hunting numbers are going down, like the drive on public land is going up. And I don't know if that's because of permission or because it's cool to hunt public ground now. But there's a big difference in hunting public ground now versus it was 10 years ago. It's tripled. in the amount of people that's hunting it.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, I know even in the last like 10 years, and like I hunt Southern Ohio, and some areas there just have like exploded with hunting pressure from when I started going there to now, which I haven't been there in a few years. But when I was going there just in like a 5-year span, it seemed like it was just more and more people. When it got publicized more, and it's easier to find areas with things like Onyx and stuff like that. It's there's a lot more resources out there now, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, it's a good thing that as long as everybody's respectful, it's a good thing that people are getting outdoors. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So with your strategy, you're talking about running, a ton of trail cameras and stuff. What is, I guess, what's your purpose with running these cameras? What are you trying to learn from the intel? What are you taking from that intel to kind of apply it to your hunt?
Well, man, I don't care what kind of camera you run, whether it's a cell camera or a regular, just standard trail camera. Like it's already happened. It's already in the past. So that's kind of how I look at, that's kind of how my strategy goes. It's like a few-year plan, and after a few years, I start to figure out the areas the deer like, the areas they don't like. The deer that are smart enough to live, I start to build a history with them and narrow their home range down. I find out the bucks that are nomadic. It's really all past tense for me. And that's how I use it. I'll move on it the next year for the most part.
Yeah. Okay. And that's such a hard thing. I know with me personally to do that. Like that's the way I look at an area. I look at it as kind of at least, just to put it in general terms, like a 3-year strategy. But I sometimes, I'll get a picture of a really big deer or something the first year, if I'm going to a new spot, and I'm like, I want to hunt it, and sometimes I do, but it's like if I can just let cameras soak in there all year and then learn from that intel after the season, you're so far ahead of kind of going into a blind. And that's why, like, even like there'll be areas I scout in the spring, and I'll throw cameras up even in the spring because the battery life's so good anymore. We run lithiums, I'll throw them up on scrapes in the spring and leave them there all year and come back and get them after the season, even if I'm not planning on hunting it, just for future reference,
Oh yeah. I mean, that's how, there's some of my cameras that only get checked once a year. Some of them are 2 to 3. Some of them in my hotter areas maybe 4 or 5 times a season. But there's a handful of my cameras that only get checked, once a year. And one thing that I really like doing, like if you're going into an area, like it all depends on hunting pressure and the way that the food plot rotations are on some of these WMAs. Like you have to be adaptable. Because the deer will gravitate towards the food. I mean, they may be using it at night, but it's going to dictate how they move during the day. So what I like to do is, like if I have a week to hunt, I like to do a big camera run, at least a day or a day and a half of nothing but scouting and checking my cameras. And then, I may have 300 acres that had 5 cameras on it. And then I go east and I had 300 or 400 more acres that had 5 cameras on it. And then, one of those blocks of timber only had 2 or 3 shooter bucks on it. And the other one had 6 or 7. So, technically I like to stack my odds. I'm an opportunist. I hunt like a coyote. So, I'm going to go where the most bucks are. And that is one good thing that the trail cameras do help you with. That's not past tense, but you just, it's a tool, man. You can't rely on them. Nothing can replace woodsmanship.
Yeah. So with this being said, talking about finding, quantities of the good bucks and putting your odds in your favor, are you hunting are you hunting a lot of the season, like through October or from velvet on, or is this more of like a rut strategy? What do you what's that look like for you?
All year, man. All year. That it doesn't matter if it's if it's September or if it's January, like, I'm still going to stack my odds. If I know I can hunt 2 days, I'm going to spend half a day and try to get, between 5 and 8 cameras checked, and then and scouting along the way, and whatever place, has the freshest sign or the most bucks on camera or a caliber that I like to shoot, that's where I'm going to go. Typically, man, I've only had one deer that got underneath my skin. That's it. So I'm never just trying to chase one deer. It's not very predictable for me. And so I just don't do it.
Yeah, I tried doing that, well, probably a couple times. Once, like, really hard, and I don't want to do it again. I don't want to say that I never will, but I don't want to. It took the fun out of it.
It really does, man. If you don't have the time to do it, it's tough. And like I said, a lot of these deer on public land, not all of them are really nomadic. And the only time that I ever done it, the deer was a booner, and I had seen it a couple times, and the deer just lived in such a small area. Like, I felt like I could do it with my limited time, and it still didn't work out.
I thought you were going to tell me a different end of that story there, but we'll go with that.
Yeah, it is what it is, man.
Yeah.
Swing and a miss.
Yep. It's realistic, right?
It is. It's realistic.
Oh, that's like last year I thought I was going to have one of those bucks that was one of the ones that I was going to get obsessed with, and I started getting trail cam photos of him 2 years ago. He was a 2.5-year-old that had 14 points, and he had split G2s and 3s, and I'm like, this is just an unbelievable Pennsylvania deer. Like, he's going to be a giant. And then this year he made it to 3 years old, and he started being a little bit more ghostly and kind of disappeared from the area where I was running the cameras in and hunting. I don't know if I was putting too much pressure on or what, but anyways, he showed up the last night right after rifle season ended. On my Exodus render, my cell camera, I hit it at that night at like midnight, and he had his whole beam broken off the one side that had all the splits. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna even try to hunt that area late season so I don't get tempted to try to shoot him. And he ended up getting shot like one of the last days of muzzleloader, mistaken for a doe. He had shed the other side and just had the base with his brow tine where it was broke off there. So that was but that deer would have been an absolute giant this year coming into it, and with just such cool character, I have a feeling I would have got pretty obsessed over it, and probably pretty disappointed in the result. But
yeah, man, it gets tough, but I mean, I guess it all depends on your goals.
Yeah. So when let's talk about goals a little bit. When you're going in to hunt, talk about, I guess, your 2019 season a little bit, and from what I don't know a whole lot. I haven't asked you these questions yet, but like, tell me a little bit how that season went for you. I heard it wasn't exactly how it was planned.
No, man, it was horrible. First off, I want to say that take advice from others. You can learn from others, but don't let anybody dictate your goals. Don't let anybody tell you what you need to be doing. Like, you need to figure that out on what you want to do. If you want to shoot a 2.5-year-old 120-inch deer, don't be ashamed of doing it. If you want to hold off for a 4 or 5-year-old 160, do it. Set your own goals and get with it. But my 2019 season, man, it started out looking good, man. Started out looking real good. I had several good bucks on camera, and I had 2 booners on camera, which is something I normally don't have that early on. And man, one of them was just like clockwork. I'd been watching him all summer in person, several pictures of him. I literally had the deer 100% down to where he was feeding and about 75% down to where he was bedding within probably a 15-acre area. So my goal was to kill him. Like, I thought that was feasible. 1 week or week and a half before season come in, I walked back there to change a camera out. I eased in there in the middle of the day with an Exodus Ringer, their cell camera. Me and a buddy found him dead, 100 yards off the road, EHD.
Oh,
and yeah, he's like 174. And then so I was starting to scramble to check some cameras and to do some things. And then I knew I had another area that was really good that had a deer I called Blackwater. He was always in that area, and he was probably a 150 the year before. And so I wanted to move that Exodus Render back there. And all along of checking the cameras, man, going and trying to scout and check these cameras a week before season come in just turned to me just finding dead deer everywhere. I found 21 dead deer in a week. Literally, the woods smelled like death. Like, you could pull up and you could just smell it in the air. Like, it was the most eerie feeling I've ever had walking in the woods.
Man.
And I had stood in one place before and seen 2 bucks dead, one floating in the creek and one laying on the side of the creek.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't looking good, and me and my buddy Matt were heading to put this camera out, and caught a whiff of something and looked over, man, and there Blackwater was dead, and taped him out. He was 4 or 5 years old at 191 inches. So it was,
oh my,
2 booners I found in a week, and 19 other deer, and then of course, the way I network out there, everybody I know that hunts the properties I hunt, they're finding the same thing. So my hit list was so strong, and it went to nothing. It's just like a whitetailer's dream, or like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Their dream was just crushed, and it went to a straight nightmare. So I had one other buck I was going to try to kill early. He lived at least through the first weekend of September that I knew of. No luck. And then just between me trying to check cameras, because I was starting to scramble because I was losing my deer. So I was, checking cameras. I normally don't check this early. Scouting, going deeper than what I normally don't go, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And it just got so bad that I completely pulled off the property. And I made a big move, man. I went to a great big piece, over 100,000 acres, and by road, it was a 3-hour difference from where I was hunting at. Great genetics, the kind of terrain, it offered everything I wanted, other than the deer density was a little lower. I come from about 25 deer per square mile, and this place had about 8 to 10, which isn't many.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it had some true giants on it. I had one 200-inch deer on camera, another 170 or 180, and we're talking a real short time period and not very many cameras. But between me trying to scramble and I could not get it done, man. I just couldn't. I could barely even making that move. I could barely even see a deer, to be honest with you. There was multiple days where I would only see like one deer.
Yeah.
So it was like in a week's time, I seen one shooter 200 yards through the woods, and there was some snow on the ground, and that's the only reason I seen him. But I was camping. I was backpack camping there, and I don't know if anybody remembers how cold it got like that first week in November or second week in November this year.
Yeah.
It was single digits several nights with me in that tent. So it wasn't a very good season all year round. I was having to drive so far to scout, check my cameras, hunt. It was such a far drive. I wanted to camp every time I went there, and it definitely opened my eyes. My 2019 season's my worst season of my life.
Well, I mean, I guess if you can pull any positives out of it, sounds like you found a new area that is holding some giants.
Well, the one thing that I can tell anybody is don't put all your eggs in one basket like I've done over the last several years. Like, have a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I will now have scouted and have at least 10 or 15 cameras on a different piece of property, a good ways away from where I normally hunt, for sure.
And the way you described that smell in the woods is, I in the area that I live and I hunt in mostly, I've never experienced EHD, but when I was living outside of Pittsburgh in the suburbs, EHD hit there, and literally driving like through like the communities and stuff, you could smell it. Like it just smelled like death. I know exactly what you're talking about. It was terrible. It was one summer that it hit really bad. It was just a disgusting smell. And then the fact that you found that many dead deer, and then on top of that, two of your top ones, that's a good way to put you down in the dumps going forward.
Well, I mean, you have to be, realistic, and like my ultimate goal is to have fun, but like I have fun like chasing these public land bucks that, elude everybody else, and I like gunning them down. And when they're not there, like, I'm not going to waste my time. Like, I'm not going to do it. And so the scramble for me to find that those bucks on a different piece of property starting in October, I couldn't do it, man. Not with the time I had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not with the 4 days a month, but it is what it is. Last year's the first year I haven't killed in 5 years. So,
hey, I know the feeling, man. I was the same way with, what's that?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so is that property that had the EHD hit real bad, is that going to be good this year, or is it going to take a few years to recover?
I'm going to say at least 3. I'm going to run probably 10 cameras in my best place. I talked to a guy that is a good hunter. I talked to him last week, and he spent his whole season there. He did not see one shooter. He had, I'm going to say, three or 4 shooters on camera, and that was it. Which I'm normally have 30 or 40 is what I'm used to.
Oh.
So, you know what I mean? I'm used to having 3 or 4 on a camera sometimes, and it just wasn't worth it, man. Was not worth it. And I'm going to say 3 years if I had to guess, because you got to think with the older class deer getting wiped out, and the younger class, there's some good looking 2-year-old bucks, but man, they got to make it through this public, and that's the hard thing for a public land buck to do, is when he's 2 years old, he's already got a big target on his back, because a lot of our 2-year-olds can get 130 inches. And no offense to the guys down south, like that's big to that's a big deer to them, or that's a big deer to anybody.
That's a big deer to me.
Get shot. Yeah, so they get shot. And it just makes it tough. So I'm going to say it's going to take a while.
Mm-hmm. I always joke to myself about I shot a buck in Ohio. I went down there and shot on public land, and it was a 12 point, and but I bet he was only 2.5 years old, maybe 3, if that. But like it was so funny because I shot a buck in Pennsylvania 2 days before that had the same size rack, but just basically had the same size rack, and he was a 5-year-old, and the body was like double the size of this other deer that was younger but had the same size rack on it. It's funny. It was like a complete adjustment for me to be able to see that. And I could see, where others going into a place like Kentucky or, that have some of those stronger, younger deer. It's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and I'm by no means a big buck killer. Like, if I think the deer is 3.5 years old and he's 130 inches at an 8-pointer, I'm going to shoot him with a long bow. So I don't want to, come off the wrong way. I'm just saying, like, it's a lot harder for a deer to make a bounce back after that when the hunting pressure is a lot more than what it would be on a piece of, private property, for say.
Yeah, no, I'd fall on you, and you're right, and it's everybody's goals are different, and mine change depending on where I'm at or what I know. I always seem to hold myself accountable a little bit more in Pennsylvania because I get more time and I scout it a lot heavier than I do when I'm traveling to, say, Ohio or something. It's all in kind of what you want, I guess.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So with that, your 2019 season went, what's it looking like for 2020 then?
So it's looking different than it ever has. Like I said, I'm going to run, I'm going to keep an eye on my home turf, my favorite piece that I've ever hunted. Even though a lot of the deer have died, like, I'm going to keep an eye on it. But the other WMAs that I like to hunt or would like to hunt, they're doing quota hunts now, and the quota hunts are from the bow season is from the second week of October to the last weekend of November. And then there's a 2-day rifle hunt the first week in November on the WMAs that are closest to me. So if I don't make that draw, then I can't hunt them. And then for sure, like, it's an every other year thing. Like, if you don't get it, then if you get a preference point. So the way I like to hunt and build my history with these deer and run these cameras and scout like these properties are my own, I have found what I would like to call, like, something like you talked about, like a semi-piece of public. There's a coal mine here about 15 minutes outside of my house, which basically you just pay a trespassing fee. They give you a permit, and it's hunted under statewide regulations. It's 11,500 acres, but it's open to statewide regulations. It's not something I typically would hunt. It's a lot of flat ground, a lot of really, really scrubby timber, but there's a lot of ag and a lot of CRP. So I know the potential for the big deer they're there. I know it without even going there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just going to be different, I think a lot of my hunting will be done on the ground or very low on a tree. I think I'm really going to have to, dig deep into some strategies and trying to adapt, and probably using some river access. So, I don't know. We'll see. You can bait on this property, which is something you can't do on, the WMAs here. So I'm looking real forward to getting some minerals started next week.
Okay, nice. And is that the way it is in Kentucky? Like, you can't run minerals or anything even outside the season?
You can, just not on public property.
Okay, I gotcha.
So in this piece, because it's privately owned, but it's in with the USDA funds and Corps of Engineers and like wetlands programs, it's ran under statewide regulations, so you can bait. I would never hunt over a corn pile or anything like that, but I can promise you I'll definitely be running some mineral sites for my cameras and for the deer.
Oh yeah, you'll gain so much intel from being able to do that. Like in Pennsylvania, we're allowed to put out minerals or really bait outside of the season, except for on state game lands. But you are allowed on the national forest, and I believe state forest too. I'm not sure on that, but and then on private land you can, and then you just have to have it out or, nothing there within 30 days of the season, I believe. But
Right.
Yeah, but
Right,
that's
pretty much.
so nice for getting inventory of the bucks there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And the good thing about like a new piece is always fun. I found that out, like it's a new challenge, and it takes it takes time to figure it out. When you're limited like I am, it takes time. And this this piece is a lot more. I normally like my piece continuous, like 8,000 acres continuous. This place is 600 acres here, 300 here, 1,100 here, 1,500 acres here. So it's going to be. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pattern my deer like I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I think that the hunting pressure will be during bow season will be the lowest I've ever had. And I think the chance for me killing a September or October buck will be the best that it's ever been.
Okay. Well, that's really that's pretty exciting. Have you killed velvet deer in the past?
No, I have not, and I've been doing it for a while. I just haven't got to connect. I've come close. I literally, the closest I ever got was the Friday before season. So literally 24, I was 24 hours away from hunting, and I was watching a bean field, the deer I've been watching all summer, come out 2 hours before dark, doing the same thing he always done. And I'm like, you're dead tomorrow afternoon. Like I was already thinking about which form I was going to get him mounted on. I thought it was that for sure. The wind's perfect. I get up in, I hang and bang. I get up in there, and 6 o'clock rolls around. He's not there. 6:30 rolls around. He's not there. 7 he rolls around. He's not there. So I'm getting really worried. And right at dark, he comes out in front of me within bow range, but he's got to walk through this long strip of CRP and then get into the beans. And the beans are 8 down so low I could have shot into them. But the freaking thing has shed his velvet. And I just seen him 24 hours ago, and he was in full velvet. Now he's got 75% of it off of him, and he showed up 2 hours later.
Oh.
And when he come by me in bow range, literally all I could see in legal shooting light was his neck and his rack and his head, and I just wasn't going to do it. So I just had to let him go, and that's as close as I've ever come in September.
Oh man, that's funny. That's some funny luck right there, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I've been. It happens, man. I guess when you get on such a, you get so high on these things, man, it's good to get humbled too.
Yeah.
And that was one of those experiences, man. Like I don't remember, it's been so long ago, but I'm sure I was telling all of my buddies like, oh yeah, he's dead. I'm going to whack him. And he's not on the wall.
Man, it's so funny. Every year I go into the season with like extreme confidence and and every year I get just beat down to the point, and then, it's just being like, okay, yeah, you don't know as much as you think you do. So just keep working.
You figure that out. The older you get to, you figure that out. I can only imagine how cocky and arrogant I was when I was in my early 20s versus my mid 30s. It's night and day.
Yeah. That's funny. So all right, so, we talked a little bit about, your strategies and how you're going in and scouting these areas. If you were to give, someone one piece of advice that you could think of when it comes to hunting public ground, and say Kentucky or some of the areas that you're in, what would that be? Or really anywhere, but what would that look like?
Set your own goals and stick to them. Don't let people dictate where to go or what to do. A lot of these pieces I've hunted, people have told me there's no good and there's no deer there, and I've got a picture of 6 booners in 1 year. Put in the time. scout it a lot more than you can hunt it. If you can hunt 3 days a week, I'm telling you right now, in the early stages, you need to be scouting a day and a half or two. And then as you start to learn, you can slack off of that, but don't ever back off of your scouting. A lot of times, that's something I didn't tell you about. One thing I do like about some of these public properties that I will look for, like I love the public properties that are in great areas but offer like a lot of human intrusion, like hikers, horseback riders. That gets the deer used to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been my experience, like it offers better hunting because there's literally people out there fishing or hiking or horseback riding, talking and riding all year. And the deer, are adapted to it because they live there. That's their home. So that may be something that, somebody can look into. Those are definitely pieces of property that I like personally.
Mm-hmm.
But just set your own goals, man, and have confidence in yourself and get after it. Don't just go climb up in a tree. You don't have to have 10 cameras or 20 cameras or 70 to kill big deer. Like, use your own eyes. If you got 5 cameras out and you're not getting a picture of a shooter deer, but there's scrapes and big rubs everywhere, like you're doing something wrong, like move your cameras or totally just take them out of the woods and put them in your tote because you're trying to rely on them too much. Like, do not let anything outweigh your woodsmanship.
So is that, I guess this is a question I didn't exactly ask you, and based on what you just said there. So is that what's kind of dictating that woodsmanship and also you're seeing what you learn from your cameras, knowing when you're going to actually, say get into a tree? I know it's not, I don't want to say start hunting because you're hunting the whole time, but as far as like once you stop the scouting and sit in the tree, what is that thing that triggers you to do that?
It does what? Sorry, you broke up on me.
Just what does it take for you to say, okay, I'm going to hunt this spot, or is it like, you just kind of walk me through what's in your head? I know every scenario is different and it's difficult to explain, but what constitutes you to be like, all right, I've done my scouting here for the last day and a half. It's time to sit here.
I started killing the deer that I wanted to when I made the transition of going into an area and thinking it looked good and hanging versus going into an area, breaking it down, figuring out what deer were using it or where exactly they were using it and going from there. Like, don't just go off of a gut feeling. Don't walk into a place and say, oh, this looks good, like I'm going to hang here. Like, find the trails. Why are the deer there? Where are they bedding? Where are they feeding? Which wind would they be here on? Like, it's really not rocket science. If you just step back and really try to figure it out, or before you ever even take off, like, go home, write down on a piece of paper, like, okay, I'm going to go in here and find out, like, I want to know, like, the 3 W's, like when, where, and why. Like, when is this deer coming here? Where is he coming from and why? And just make a checklist and go into a place. And when you go into a place, you have a mental note of what you need to find when you go in there. And if you can get everything, kind of lined out, that's what I do. And that's, when I hang there.
Gotcha. And I'm guessing with those questions you're asking yourself, that all depends on the time of the year and everything else, depending on what that setup would look like.
Yes. Yeah. And on a lot of these publics, like, don't be scared to get aggressive. Like, if I bump a deer I want to shoot, I just move on to the next one. Like, that deer is going to will show up on one of my cameras or somewhere. And I'm telling you, man, the properties I've hunted because of how the horseback riding and the hiking and the small game hunting and the horse and everything, like, the deer, they're just not, it goes against everything everybody ever told me. Like, I've literally bumped all these deer, and then they're still on my cameras. They're still, they may be on 5 cameras, but they're on 2 of them in the daylight. So they're still killable. Like, I didn't run the deer out of the county. So don't be scared to get aggressive. And if you bump one, just, shrug it off, stay positive, and move on.
Gotcha. That's with the amount of scouting you're doing and stuff in the season, I figured that was kind of your thought process into it, and not worrying as much about it, because the amount of intel you can gain versus the I guess negative of potentially bumping one is far outweighs it.
Oh yeah. Now don't get me wrong. Like, there's known bedding areas, or if I know where a buck's bedded, and which is really hard to do. I'm not great at it.
Yeah.
I don't want to even sound like I am. Like, I won't go there. Like, I'll say, for instance, like, one of my best stands, or my best areas that I like to hang in year round, I don't care if it's September to January, it's good all year. I can only go in there. It's right on the line, and it's almost a clear cut on the private property. So the deer are literally bedding on the private and going to the public. Like, if the wind is blowing wrong there, like from the public to the private, I will not check my cameras there. I for sure won't do that. But if I'm trying to get 10 cameras checked, and I know which 10 cameras I am, as long as it's not messing up anything that I think it's going to mess up, I'm going to get to them as quick as I can. I'm not going to walk, the road. There's a 4-mile walk. I'm going to cut through the timber where it's 2.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And the intel, man, the intel you find while doing that is priceless. Like, I've killed deer doing that. I've been like, oh man, this is a great looking area. Look at all this fresh sign. And I always keep like a couple of floater cameras with me. So I always have one with me when I'm checking cameras. So, let's get one in this area. Let's go ahead and break it down while I'm here. And I'll figure out like when is the best time to try to kind of, hunt this. And when I come hunting, I can check this camera, and then I can see if everything that I was thinking was true. And if it's not, then, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with your standpoint of the scouting more. And, I've been kind of listening to you here, but when the way I look at it, especially when I go to places like when I'm going to Ohio, or I'm going to a place that, I haven't been into, if I have 5 days to hunt, I'm going to spend as much time as I need to scout it first. The last buck that I killed in Ohio was that way. I scouted it in the spring, and I had like potential areas marked, and I just went and checked all of them until I found a spot that had everything was lining up. It looked good. It was during the rut, so it was, a good funnel over the side of this hill, and kind of in this draw that was coming up. Everything just felt right, and it made sense from the standpoint of I'd never thought of it the way that you said, the what, where, when, but that whole the 3 W's there, looking at it that way makes sense. But I set up based on that after scouting for half the day, and ended up shooting a buck that night out of that spot. And it's like, if I would have went to my predetermined spot that I had from the spring, would it have worked out? I don't know, maybe, but I love just moving around and finding that hot sign and figuring that out. That's awesome.
Yeah, and don't over process it, and don't overthink it, but like, put thought into everything you do. Like, if you kill a deer, like think if you don't know why, like, think about it. Like, why did this deer do this? Like, where did he come from, or why did he do this? And then maybe that will shed some light onto, like, why the deer are using that area. Like, oh, he did come from that way. Well, maybe I need to, now maybe I need to walk over there. Now that you may find, like, oh man, that's an awesome bedding area, or oh, that's a doe bedding area. He was coming downwind of it. Like, just don't overthink it, but put some thought into everything you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that couldn't be any more truer advice, and a great mindset, and I'm pumped that I actually got to get you on here, Josh, and talk to you. I've been hearing your name for a while from some people, and I've been checking out your stuff, so I was glad to get you on here and chat a little bit.
Man, I appreciate it. There's guys out there a lot better than me, and to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you that I'm successful because I pray about it, I don't worry about it, and I have fun. If I make a mistake, I just shrug it off and I move on. The main thing is staying positive and having fun, and don't let your hobbies become before your priorities. The day that you put hunting in front of your family or your wife or your kids, like, I'm just telling you, you're leaving the house for failure before you ever even get to the deer stand.
Yeah, that's very true. That's in very, very good input and Josh, that's just like I said, just your whole way of going about it, and just is definitely admirable. And I'm super pumped to be able to get you on here, because you're very humble for the listeners. And once they check out your Instagram page and stuff, and even then, I mean, you're extremely successful in the hunting you do, and very knowledgeable. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that information. And as you kind of stated earlier, there's not one way to do this. Everyone's got their own way and kind of got to figure it out. But I like to take information from people like yourself and others that are successful and see where that fits into my overall plan.
Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, you can learn something from everybody, and, just figure out your own style and go for it, man. Set your own goals and have fun. And, that's what it's all about. If you're not having fun, you're not going to be very successful. I'm telling you that right now. If you're out there and you're trained, there's a difference in going out there and being tired and making mistakes versus going out there and just making mistakes because you're trying. Just have fun.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, where can people find some more information from you? I talked about your Instagram. You want to give your Instagram handle and any other places that people could find you?
So the only place you can find me is Instagram. I'm fairly active on it. And it's BG_bow hunter. And that's it, man. I like to take pictures and I like to have fun.
Yeah, very, very talented photographer too, from that standpoint. So check out his page. And again, Josh, I don't think this will be the last time we're talking on the podcast here, if you agree to come back on. But
man, I don't think that I've ever, I've probably done 10 or 15 of these, and I've never turned one down. And anytime you can talk big deer or the outdoors with anybody, I mean, it's a good time. So yeah, I'm sure you and I will be talking sometime or another on here again.
Yeah. And first of all, you could have made me feel a little bit more special by saying that, instead of saying that you've agreed to all of them, but
hey, I will say this. You've asked me some better questions than I've been asked, because I've had some people ask me, I've been on some podcasts where they just didn't ask the right question. So I couldn't give the answers, and
yeah,
I feel good about this. You done good.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's believe me, it's stressful to kind of, figure it out and figure out how to pull that information out of people, cause it's like, I know everyone, the people I'm interviewing like yourself, all the information's there. It's my job to figure out how to get it out of you.
Oh yeah. Yep. No, it was, this was well done, man. I definitely had fun. I appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. I do appreciate that.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.